the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome into another edition of the Spot Track Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with our resident money man, Mike Ginnitti. Today's episode brought to you by Authentic Audio Productions. Take the hassle out of podcasting and improve quality all at the same time. You can visit AuthenticAudioPro.com for more details. Mike, we made it. Today is the day. Finally have some real live NFL action in front of us. Are you ready to watch Taylor Swift watch a football game?
Very nice. Let's get this out of the way. Are you in for the three-peat?
I am. I can't tell if it's bold to go that route or if I'm a coward for picking the Chiefs again.
I mean, it has to be bold because it's basically never happened, right? In the modern era, not even Brady. I think I'm in on it. I think I'm there. I have much cloudier visions about the NFC, and I think rightfully so. I mean, there's just so much power being given to Jordan Love and this Packers team for winning one playoff game. I mean, so much money, so much power. They're not that much different. I mean, what are we talking about here? I see a lot of really smart people just saying Niners Chiefs, and I have to agree, but I don't want to agree. You know, it's so chalky, it's so boring. But man, when you live in the roster construction world here, and I nerd out day in and day out in this stuff, I just don't see two better teams. After it's all settled and the dust is settled, now Atlanta did a ton. Tennessee did a ton. Philadelphia did a ton. You want to tell me those are fair sleepers? You throw some money down on that stuff. But at the end of the day, those are still the teams, and I don't know why anybody would put their money anywhere else right now.
So I think the Lions are right there, though, and they need to be in this discussion. I think their roster at this point is almost as good as San Francisco's, Philadelphia's. I think that there is a very clear tier 3 in the NFC. The problem is, and San Francisco's found a way around this, the quarterback that moves around and escapes the pocket is such a cheat code, especially when you get into the playoffs now. And in the past, it was, well, yeah, but all that guy could do is run. Obviously, in today's NFL, we have a number of examples of guys that when they escape, they can also make throws on the run, really accurate throws deep down the field. And when you're getting chased down by a pass rusher in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, being able to do that and not being Jared Goff is so helpful. That is why I do like the Packers out of the NFC. I would take Jordan Love if he takes that next step. I think they're going to be a really tough out come playoff time, as good as those other rosters are. But that's my non-chalky pick.
By the way, Josh Jacobs did make them better. There's no question Josh Jacobs made them better. So there's that, I guess. Did Detroit get better, or did they just get older?
That's a good question. I think they got better if Jameson Williams finally has his head screwed on straight, because it's like an extra first-round pick that they weren't really utilizing before. And then defensively, didn't they add some to the secondary?
Oh yeah, they did.
Yeah. So their defense should be a little bit better. Pass rush was already good, but the secondary was a little bit of a leak for them. So that should be short up a little bit. So I mean, I guess they're a little bit better. I mean, the Eagles, it's the same thing. If anything, the Eagles might have gotten worse year over year. They lose Hassan Reddick. They lose Jason Kelce.
Yeah.
They add Jahan Dotson, and we're like, oh man, look at this team. You know, I'm not sure that the Eagles should be better because I think their division is getting worse. I'm not sure that they're actually improving.
That's the problem that I have with the Packers and the Lions. Is it's all sort of looking the same in that division. Now, I know Minnesota could be 4 and whatever, but it does feel like they're going to be bashing each other in the head for most of the regular season. And I'm trying to find the team that's going to avoid that. It might be the Rams, by the way.
Yeah,
it might be McVay.
To me, that's the sleepy, sneaky team in the NFC. Yeah. Just because I love McVay that much, and they have certainly gotten the most out of the talent that they've brought in over the years. Getting past the Aaron Donald thing, those two FSU defensive linemen that they drafted, which, by the way, a whole separate debacle for a different show, what's going on in Tallahassee. But if those guys are able to give you some replacement level value, you know, if the war drop off isn't too big, if you want to use baseball terms, from those guys to Aaron Donald, it takes two to replace him. then they might be okay.
Greg Allman from Fox Sports, a reporter and an analyst that we deal with quite a bit on Spot Track, posted this morning that the average roster sends 6 UDFAs into week 1. McVay's going to roll out 16. 16.
Wow.
Yep. He is turning this thing over. He is taking control of the reins. He's letting Stafford be the omnipresent sort of veteran on this roster. And there's just a lot of positives if they all hit. There really is a lot, because it means it could stick. You know what I mean? It's not. This isn't just an all-in motive, kind of like we're seeing maybe San Francisco be, and just to a certain degree, a few other teams. But real quick before we get off this, because this is the opener, are not enough people talking Baltimore? Are we done with Baltimore? Do we have Lamar fatigue, even though he just won the MVP?
I think we don't have Lamar regular season fatigue. We have Lamar postseason fatigue, because he hasn't delivered on anybody that has predicted the Ravens in years past. Last year was such a good setup for them. And I didn't realize this really until the last month, how high smart NFL people are on Mike Macdonald, who now is the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks, and losing him is like losing your best star on defense. So I don't think that the fantasy edition of Derrick Henry is enough to put people over the top with Baltimore. They're out on Lamar as a playoff winner, and I think the defense takes a step back if Macdonald's as good as people assume. A lot of people out there picking him to win Coach of the Year. That's how high they are. So to go back to the NFC West, people think I've heard a lot of positive talk. I'm not sure I totally buy in on Arizona. A lot of positive talk about Seattle. The Rams are sneaky good for obvious reasons. And then the 49ers are one of the class teams in the NFL. That division might be the best in football again.
And the Niners are intact for week 1.
They are. That was such a professional transition. I got to give credit where credit is due here. So they were playing with fire as we inched closer and closer to the season. But the important deals, they got done. Most recently, Trent Williams signs a 3-year, $82.6 million deal, includes $48 million guaranteed at signing, $25.6 is a signing bonus. It's going to pay him a league high 27 plus for an offensive lineman this season. Money well spent for San Francisco.
Yeah, I haven't got to this one yet, but all the numbers you just gave out are basically all we need to know. This is a 2 for 48, which on its own is incredible. And then you add in the fact that he's 36 years old, and it's even more incredible. The 27 and change this year is by far a high. He was only set to make about 21 on the previous contract. So they did exactly what they thought they were going to do. They brought a ton of money from 2026 into 2024 and 2025. And they added an extra $5 million to the overall value of what he was set to make and what he will make now. And that $5 million is going to cover the fines he just incurred from training camp and mini camp and missing preseason games. $5.46 million that the Niners cannot pull back on. The CBA says you have to fine him that money. Well, they just gave it back to him on the tail end of this 3-year restructured contract. So it all works out in the end. And the 49ers offense looks like, as long as McCaffrey's going to go, 100% ready to go.
Do you think it's fair for San Francisco naysayers, maybe some people down on this team because of the way that all of this went? Not only did they lose the Super Bowl, and we've got all these historical trends that Super Bowl losers tend to take a step back the next year, their roster isn't, but they did have internal strife. Do you think it's fair to look at the 49ers, the way that they handled Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk, and say, given that situation, those guys putting money ahead of teams, if you want to put it that way, and the fact that they lost the Super Bowl last year is a reason to be down on them?
It's a fair question. I've already heard Brandon Ayuk say publicly that he probably messed this one up a little bit and should have just signed the freaking thing in March. So I don't think that's an issue. And do you think Trent Williams at any point in time was either concerned or angry? We've talked about this quite a bit, and I know it gets kind of cliched, but letting a 36-year-old superstar, future Hall of Famer, just kind of coast through the summer and then give him some extra dough before he starts week 1, that's probably peak veteran NFL football offseason for that kind of player. As long as he's physically ready to go, obviously, I don't think there's any ill will. I think John Litch is even more of a superstar right now, and we'll see if Shanahan holds up his end of the bargain. But no, I don't think this was mishandled. I know there's a lot of BS going around about how Ayuk, was kind of, sent through the ringer with these contract offers, and he just had to settle for it. And you and I know what I've been saying all along here is that the 49ers had a price. It was going to be that price or back to $14 million. I think the trade stuff was kind of overblown a little bit. So maybe there was some back and forth with the agent that could bite them in the butt a little bit. But this is a preeminent roster, a preeminent front office. This is maybe the class of the NFL in a lot of cases. The players got what they got. I think they're all happy in that regard. And I think it's full speed ahead. I don't know that there's any looking back saying we should have done this differently outside of, like I said, Ayuk sort of saying would have been a lot easier just to take that money in March and not have to go through the summer of BS I went through. No,
and I think that's fair. And if you're looking at this team and thinking there's a lack of cohesion and it's me above team and all of that stuff, let's also not forget one of their teammates just got shot and survived.
Crazy.
And thank God that it worked out that way. Ricky Pearsall's a part of this team. I don't know that this is an angle that enough people are discussing, and maybe because it's not the most important angle here, because we were talking about a life that was saved by a couple of inches, but that's the kind of thing that brings a team together.
Not to mention,
I'm not just trying to hot take this. I think
showed up for work the next day, Brandon.
And I mean, if that doesn't fire you up,
that's it, right?
That team's gonna be ready to go.
Yeah,
it's and I had heard that that's part of the reason why Trent Williams said enough is enough. Like,
fair.
Some things are more important than money, and seeing your teammates survive something like that. So
let me give you one name on this point that at least sort of satisfies what you're asking here. You're looking for a little negativity out of this team, and I get it. You're trying to poke holes.
I was trying, but I don't know that I can.
Tebow's getting run through the ringer a little bit here. That this will be his final year now that the Ayuk's on a contract and Purcell is going to be the next man up. We talked about this a little bit in that dynamic. It's not necessary. They can make all the contracts work. They're going to roll over about 35 million of cap space when it's all said and done. Purdy's contract isn't going to crush him on the cap in year one. You know how this stuff works. It always takes 2 or 3 years for that to settle in. They can keep everybody. Do they want to keep everybody? And if Debo gets hurt again in 2024, they won't keep Debo in 2025. We just know how that's going. But that's a name to watch in terms of maybe falling out of favor a little bit. And, if Kittle starts to look 40, that's another name to watch. But I think in terms of what happened this offseason, it's just full speed ahead.
So you don't think that these deals that they made, the concessions that a lot of us thought they were going to have to make in order to set themselves up better in the future, this isn't going to change a cash-strapped team heading into 2025?
I don't think so, because there's always cap conversions to get you around that, to keep the band together. And if Debo comes out and he is irreplaceable, and I think his skill set can be at times, they're just gonna make it go for one more season. And then when Brock Purdy's cap and cash really starts to hit the fan, they can structure that accordingly year 2, year 3. Then you move on from certain players that maybe have aged out and you're looking for cheaper talent at that point in time. But if they want to keep this thing together through 2025, I don't see any reason, financially speaking, that they can't make it work.
So Jamar Chase kindly showed up for work in Cincinnati. He practiced with the team yesterday. All signs pointing to a new deal coming soon. What do we know as of now? Is that deal imminent?
I didn't think so until I woke up this morning and poured the first cup of coffee and started to read some of the tea leaves from Rap Sheet and Schefter and those guys who are like posting these agent graphics, right? Talking about how, hey, Joe Burrow signed his contract in the first week of September and became the highest paid player at his position and blah, blah, blah. And it sure seems like they're prepping us for the fact that Jamar Chase is not only going to sign a contract, but it may sign the largest wide receiver contract in the history of football, which is certainly on the table here. I feel like it might be coming. You know my stance. I don't think Cincinnati wants this to happen. But it seems like the hold-in and the baseball caps on the sideline have done the job. And I would, at this point, vote that maybe by the time you're listening to this, Jamar Chase has a big, gigantic, possibly historic record-setting wide receiver contract.
Spottrack.com for all the latest details on that, if that is the case. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, but he's looking at this huge $100 million contract. That those details will be found on the website. He is entering year 4 of a 5-year deal, and it feels like this shouldn't be a trend to get paid this early, but we know that it absolutely is. Nearly every player drafted inside of the top 10 in 2021, which is Jamar Chase's draft class, who has been a good player. So we're leaving the Zach Wilsons out of it. All of those guys have been paid. So why is it taking so long for Chase compared to his peers? And I don't necessarily agree with the system in the way that it is, but this is the system. And all the guys that were around him in that draft, the Waddles, the Devontae Smiths, Trevor Lawrence, all of those guys have been paid. So why is Chase last on this list?
It's phenomenally become a trend for this 2021 class. And maybe this is just where we are now going forward. And we'll see what happens with next year's class. But it's not been a trend with wide receivers. So I ran like 15 years of data. The only other guys outside of Waddle and Devontae Smith who have gotten the only other wide receivers after year 3 of the rookie contract to sign an extension are Tavon Austin, who wasn't really a wide receiver, and Rashad Bateman, who just basically took a declined 5th-year option and rolled it into like a 2-year, $12 million contract in Baltimore to become like their 4th or 5th option. So there isn't a precedence for this. CeeDee Lamb went to his 5th-year option. Justin Jefferson went to his 5th-year option. Every other wide receiver has either not garnered an extension or has waited to the very last minute to get their extension. So what Chase is asking for is not the norm, though it's becoming the norm, and we'll see if it sticks that way. And I do think he will follow suit here with his 2021 classmates.
And I guess to be fair to the comparison of Waddle and Smith, who also went in 2021, those guys weren't asking for top of market deals.
Not necessarily. Right. I mean, they probably asked and then they were told no. And then they said, all right, how about second tier? And
right.
I think
Chase isn't taking second tier.
Not even close.
I'm sure they've already thrown that at him.
They're going to have to make this work to get at least to the $35 million point, in my opinion. And then we'll see if he can surpass Jefferson in some degree.
All right, let's talk about one of the guys that will be trying to shut down players like Jamar Chase throughout the course of the year. Patrick Surtain Jr. signed a 4-year extension that carries him through 2029. What do we know about this deal and the way that it's structured with Denver?
Yeah, it's a great one, and it was necessary. I had a chance to speak to the agent a little bit, who's been really trying to push this contract for a while and push this position back to where it belongs. There was a time not too long ago, where top cornerbacks were being paid basically the same as top wide receivers. And that's just not the case anymore. Before the Surtain deal, Jefferson was at 35. Jair Alexander was at 21 per year. That's a $14 million gap. That's a massive gap for positions that complement each other on each side of the ball. So Surtain getting a real $24 million per year is a step in the right direction. But this is more about the guarantee structure and the guts of this thing. He had 2 years left on his rookie contract, including the 5th-year option. So this becomes a 6-year contract. And from a practicality standpoint, there's 4 structured guaranteed years here through 2027. That's a really big deal for Denver. Torrey Dandy, the agent, generally likes to keep things small and short and sweet with his wide receiver contracts and to some degree with his cornerbacks as well. The reason Denver was able to get a 4th year practicality out of this is Surtain's only 24 years old, all right? This is kind of one of those situations where age works in everybody's factor. So he'll probably see $77 million over the next 4 years before he even has to think about a new contract. When he's only 27, 28 years old, this guy's going to make bank if he stays at the top of the market. It won't be quite the Darrelle Revis situation. That's the unicorn cornerback financial GOAT, but he is on a path right now to be that next man to really secure the big bag 2 or 3 times at his position going forward.
And I'm glad that you brought up the comparison to wide receivers, because these are, I think, equally valuable positions. If you're looking at the structure of a roster, we have 7 wide receivers with an overall contract value of $100 million or more. Yet we have 1 defensive back, and he's not the best example, Denzel Ward. Are you surprised that corners haven't caught up? When did this happen? Because it's not like this position became less valuable yet. Is it just is it a marketing thing that wide receivers sell more jerseys? What do you think goes into this?
To some degree, yes, that is the answer. It's the league decided this was going to be an offensive sport, right? They changed all the rules. They made everything work in one direction, and cornerback got a hell of a lot harder. So when you started to probably run some algorithms, statistically speaking, these guys started to nosedive based on what Revis and those guys were doing 10, 15 years ago. And they just decided, hey, maybe these guys aren't as good as they used to be. It's not the case. Offense is just way easier right now because of how everything is, kind of swoos in that direction. It's coming back. It's going to slowly come back. It's going to be a nice March for cornerback contracts. You've got Derek Stingley Jr. eligible. You've got McDuffie, the Trent McDuffie, the next big Chiefs contract probably coming. And then, of course, Sauce Gardner should really push this thing to the next level if the Jets are even close to worth a damn in 2025. So we're on the precipice. The Surtain contract is kind of the preamble to what's coming. But look out for a nice offseason of defensive back, I think, extensions, though, we'll see if teams make them wait. That's the other part of this conversation.
It does seem like that's the answer because at cornerback, you have your guys that are standards that are just as good every single year, but there's a lot more fluidity in terms of how you would rank these guys year to year. Where at wide receiver, if you're great one year, you're rolling that over to the next year. It's a much more predictable position, is what I'm trying to say. And it seems like the guys that are predictable at cornerback are also older, so then they don't get the monster contract because of age. So either there's unpredictability or there's an age discrimination against these cornerbacks. But like you said, we're coming back. We're settling back.
Let me throw this in too, though, because it could just be the other side's overpaid, right? I think there's a lot of teams out there that think wide receivers should not be making this money right now. At least, one big wide receiver on a roster, let alone two. And there's a couple teams now that have two. But there's a world where we're overshooting our shot on some of these wide receiver contracts, and that may come back down to normal a little bit as well.
Well, definitely the two. I think that is that's a trend that will not keep up. But having the one and those guys that get paid, we're not seeing drop off. That's what seems to dampen these sort of contracts over years is when you have bad deals that you can look at and say that these three didn't go well. Why would I do that to my team? But all these wide receivers are coming through. Let's talk some baseball. Matt Chapman signed a 6-year, $151 million extension to remain a San Francisco Giant for the remainder of the 2020s. He had an opt-out available after this year, carrying a $26 million valuation. Why now for San Francisco? Why now for Matt Chapman? Yeah,
it really is a weird time to hear a baseball contract extension hit the books. The player deserved it. He's been sort of a roller coaster ride for the past couple of years. He was like an MVP candidate midway through 2023 in Toronto, and then he got traded, and then everything just fell off a cliff. So we'll see what happens here. But San Francisco saw enough. They are looking for a resume. We've been talking about this quite a bit now for the past 6 months. They signed Snell when nobody else wanted Snell. They signed Chapman when nobody wanted Chapman. They gave them all the power in the world with opt-outs. And now they've locked in Chapman without opt-outs and a full no trade clause and a 6-year guarantee. I think this is coming for Blake Snell as well. I don't know if he'll take it because I don't know if Scott Boras will do this twice before free agency. Very rare for Scott Boras to do this. But they are building up as much momentum as possible before we get to November and December, because they're going after their third straight big fish, right? They missed on Ohtani, even though I think they were close. They missed on Judge, even though I know they were damn close, and they were the highest bidders at one point. They were damn close on Aaron Judge. So now they're going to turn to Juan Soto, and they want Juan Soto and that Scott Boras situation to all come together nicely. And this is San Francisco throwing Boras and Chapman a bone early to say, look, we're going to overpay you a little bit. We're going to make this work, give you an extra year that you probably wouldn't get from any other team. Now you go out there and do your Juan Soto shopping, Scott, and remember us. All right. Put us in the back. You know what? They probably already got an offer in hand, right? They know exactly where it all stands. So they are trying to make this work so that they can finally compete in this behemoth of a division out there that contains Arizona and San Diego and, of course, the Dodgers. And this is pretty good business out of them. You know, they keep a cornerstone third baseman. I think they're going to keep Snell as their ace, and they're going to try like hell to make Juan Soto their next big fish.
This has not been a franchise that's afraid to push the chips in, but It does seem like they've had a tougher time attracting free agents. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, the Judge stuff got weird, if you remember, right? Yeah. The crime. Ohtani, remember Ohtani was afraid to go to the stadium because at that point in time, there was a lot of police stuff going on and crime, and it is right downtown, and it's in a weird part of the city, and the city as a whole, I know, has had a lot of trouble with this, but it's also San Francisco, and there's gobs of money and gobs of celebrities that affiliate with themselves with this, and now the Golden State Warriors operate within the confines of the city. And so I think they're rebuilding the attractiveness that was sort of, exposed in the Barry Bonds era. That's kind of the best era of modern baseball in terms of the San Francisco Giants. They just need one player to put on the face of, all of their media guides for a few years so they can recapture this. And obviously Juan Soto would be that player, but I still think they're drawing the short straw here at the end of the day.
Let's wrap today's episode with an NFL edition of our Quick Hits. It is, in fact, kickoff day in the league. We are all celebrating accordingly. So let's look back a little bit. Best and worst of the offseason. If you were to say free agent contract, who ends up getting that award as we look back on the offseason that was?
I'm going to go totally against what you said at the top of the show here and say that it goes to a Philadelphia Eagles player, because you're right. They did lose Hassan Reddick. They did lose Fletcher Cox. Jason Kelce did retire. All those players outside of Reddick, who maybe they knew was going to be a bit of a contract mess, were super old. And they're trying to get younger, and they have drafted well. And at some point, those draft picks are going to pop. But they also added Bryce Huff on a 3 for 51 that's actually a 2 for 34 from the Jets, who sure as hell need him right now, by the way, all things considered. But the Eagles have him, and they have him cost controlled, and they have him basically to lead their edge rush / linebacking core when that got decimated over the past couple of off seasons because of just players that have aged out. So I just think that's going to be a perfect fit at the end of the day, and it's a really good price, and it's just Howie Roseman doing Howie Roseman stuff.
Yeah, and the Fletcher Cox replacement, this is why Roseman in the draft has just been masterful. Jalen Carter steps right in, was already one of the best, analytically, was one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
Right.
So they should be able to fill those pieces in. I'm not too worried about Philadelphia. What about an extension candidate? What would you say as far as the best offseason for the guys that got extended for their current teams?
Yeah, when Tristan Wirfs signed his extensions with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you asked me what I thought, and I said I didn't think it was nearly enough, and that's usually good news for the team. So while he's still getting a ton of money, he's going to make well over 100 when it's all said and done over the next 40 years. This is pretty nice value for a cornerstone left tackle on a team that's going to try to flip this switch immediately, right? They're going to rip a big Band-Aid off after 2024, regardless of what happens, whether they're good or bad. That may include Baker Mayfield. That definitely is going to include Chris Godwin and Levante David and a couple of other pieces of that defense. So they're going to try to replace probably 6 or 7 starters after this season. But knowing you have, a shutdown safety in Winfield locked in, you've got Evans around for maybe one more year that you could trade him if he's part of that, that rebuild. But having a left tackle just allows you to do anything you need over the next couple of off seasons. And there's no better example of that than Houston, who had Laramie Tunsil, who had a guard, who had a couple of defensive line pieces in place to make the rebuild go smoother and make everybody happier and protect a young quarterback. Imagine that, right? With some of this, what we're going to see out here with 4 starters starting week 1. If you're not ready to protect the next guy up, you're just you're a recipe for disaster. They're going to be ready because of this Wirfs extension.
Yeah, and Baker Mayfield, not a guy people are talking about as far as pressure on him this year, but if he regresses, Tampa Bay could be looking for a new quarterback soon, even though they just paid Baker. Is that a contract they can get out of, by the way? Let's say Baker's bad this year. Is that
It's a 1 for 40.
Yeah, okay.
That's all it is. It's a 1 for 40. Yep.
As far as trades go, man, there's one that sticks out that happened right before the NFL draft this year that I think probably ends up taking the cake. What do you think?
There were a few. I liked a lot of the moves. I even liked Deontay Johnson going to Carolina for Carolina. Yep. I still don't know what the hell. Obviously, he was a locker room problem. There's no question that those rumors are true. But I don't know if you've seen Pittsburgh's weapons to go with Russ Wilson. Sorry, Russ. Let's just put it that way. It ain't looking good. My favorite one was L'Jarius Sneed. Because it definitely made the Kansas City Chiefs a little bit weaker, and I live in the city of Buffalo, so at times you have to kind of appreciate those kind of things. It definitely made Tennessee better, and I thought the contract they gave him was commensurate with what he's deserved of. He no player over the past 2 seasons went from a smaller market value to maybe a max market value quicker than L'Jarius Sneed. He just was an absolute. He was a role player at one point for Kansas City, and now he's going to be the CB1 in Tennessee for the next 4 seasons. So it's a good move by Tennessee to try to kind of quickly rebuild their a couple of bad drafts and an aging Ryan Tannehill and a situation that I think a lot of people are down on. This is not a bad team, though. There's some smart money hitting Tennessee right now as we start week 1, and it's moves like this why people are starting to buy in a little bit.
That makes me feel good. I bet Tennessee plus 4.5 about a month ago. So I love hearing that. They might be, as far as what you do for a living, might be the most interesting team in the NFL this year, because I think they revamped. They had more of a home makeover, to put it that way, than any other team in the NFL. They will look completely different than they did a year ago. It
felt like before the offseason started, the GM just got on the phone with every other GM and said, listen, whenever you got a trade going, just call us. We want to talk about everything at this point in time, because everything's on the table, and they pulled the trigger on 4 or 5 pretty sizable offseason moves that should help, but we'll see.
Let's talk about the worst of the offseason. Same questions. Free agent contract. Who are we looking at here as far as the worst of it goes?
Look, the Steelers don't need any help with their linebacking core. They are still linebacker U after all these years. And, the college down the road certainly helps, but Penn State's still churning them out left and right. But why Patrick Queen decided he had to take the lowest possible contract with the team that always gets the best value out of linebackers makes no sense to me. But he did. He took a 3 for 41, which, because of Pittsburgh's guarantee structure, is actually a 1 for 13. This was a $21 million player in our system. He could have joined any defense at least 17 to 18 million. Somebody was going to max out at 20. There's no question he had an offer for 20 million a year to go with what Roquan Smith took in Baltimore to replace him. I get it. That Pittsburgh defense and what they do for a living over there is extremely, extremely tantalizing. But this guy left money on the table. And I hope, if this Steelers situation turns extremely sour, that he is traded out of there and into a situation where he can cash in again, because I think this is a nice player. It's a huge win for Pittsburgh, but from a contract standpoint, he left too much on the table here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that one up. I kind of forgot Patrick Queen was on the Steelers, but that defense might be good enough to carry them somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as the quarterback position doesn't get in the way. What about an extension, as far as the worst extension of the offseason? Because you have about 100 to choose from. I feel like we've been talking extensions on this podcast. Every episode, we have a new one for the last couple of months.
Yeah, here's where we get a little bit of hot takey and a little buzzworthy. I picked Trevor Lawrence, which, is only the biggest contract extension we had this offseason. But that's kind of why. He was very much a bubble extension candidate, right? There really wasn't an immediate need to do this. And the only way that Jacksonville looks great, signing him right after year 3, along with, basically every other quarterback out there, is if he becomes a tier 1 quarterback. Now, not Allen and Mahomes and Lamar, and not that tier, but the average, above average tier that we're talking about here, because he's not there yet. They are banking on the fact that he can progress into something that is much, much better than what he has provided them for 3 seasons here. And they did so with a structure that basically guarantees 5 seasons. This is a 5-year, $202 million contract from a practicality standpoint. And that's just too much. And I needed to see a little bit more to give him that kind of stability. Now, that's why I'm not worried about Tua, and I'm not worried about even Jordan Love's extension so much. Those are 3-year deals. Those teams can get out of it in 3 years and start the whole process over. Jacksonville's going to have some pain if they want to go that route. They're going to have some serious dead cap pain and rebuilding pain to do what they need to do, unless this player works out. And they must know more than we do, because I'm concerned that he's their guy for 5 more seasons based on what we saw for the first 3.
It does feel like maybe the biggest blind faith contract that we've seen in the history of the NFL. So that's a good one there. Let's wrap with the worst trade of the offseason. Go ahead. Hit me with it, Buffalo Bills fan. What you got?
Look, if this was a different wide receiver, the Stephon Diggs to Houston trade would feel a heck of a lot better. And again, I'm not thinking about Buffalo because Buffalo took a lot of pain, a lot of dead cap pain to make this move. This was 1 year earlier than the contract said this should have happened, which says something from Buffalo's standpoint as well, by the way. I'm just worried that he goes to this immaculately great Houston, young Houston team and just does something that rubs the culture the wrong way. Because guess what? It happened in Minnesota. And then it started to happen in Buffalo. And before it really happened in Buffalo, they took a $33 million hit to say, get the hell out of here. Right? So I hope that them restructuring him into a 1 year contract was them reading the room, right? And understanding that, hey, this guy's phenomenal on a short-term basis. He is exactly what we're looking for to be the dad in the room, right? As you've coined the phrase for NBA locker rooms. That's exactly what they want him to be. But he does overstay his welcome everywhere he goes. For whatever reason, that's just the guy that he is. So if Houston's thinking we're going to overpay a little bit for 1 year of Stephon Diggs just to get everybody else 15% better and more experienced and bring this whole thing together from a glue standpoint, perfect. But if not, buyer beware, because we've seen it too many times now.
Yeah, I think he'd be more like the crazy uncle than the team dad. Yeah. But if you can win a Super Bowl with Antonio Brown on your team, talking to you, Tampa, then you should be able to do it with Stephon.
Was he on the team, though?
Well, he was around.
Yeah.
I saw, by the way, real quick, Antonio Brown. I like the self-awareness here. Tweeted on Labor Day and said every work day is a half day if you just leave. He tweeted that. So funny.
Just an all-time video. All time.
Check out AuthenticAudioPro.com if you need a podcast assist, and do us a favor, subscribe and rate this pod that you are enjoying right now. And make sure you visit SpotTrack.com for all of the latest in the sports contractual world. Enjoy the NFL tonight. Till next time, Mike.